It was an unusually crisp evening in Washington, D.C. The kind where the air hummed with an electric energy that only a place as powerful as the nation's capital could create. Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, had just wrapped up another long day of briefings, answering tough questions from reporters and standing her ground in the press room. She was used to the heat of the job, to the rapid-fire debates, to the ceaseless scrutiny of her every word. But nothing in her career had prepared her for the personal invitation she found waiting on her desk that evening. The elegant white envelope bore the presidential seal. Her breath caught as she carefully peeled it open. Inside, the note was penned in bold, unmistakable handwriting. Dear Karoline, the Trump family cordially invites you to join us for an intimate dinner at the White House this Friday. We appreciate your unwavering dedication and loyalty. Looking forward to an evening of good conversation and camaraderie. Warm regards, Donald J. Trump and family. Karoline reread the words twice, her heart pounding. A personal dinner with the president and his family? This wasn't just a routine political gathering or an official engagement. It was something far more significant. It was an acknowledgement of her work, her loyalty, and perhaps even a gesture of gratitude. She sat back in her chair, the weight of the moment sinking in. The press secretary's role was often thankless. She had spent months defending policies, navigating controversies, and standing firm against relentless media attacks. Yet, through it all, she had remained fiercely committed to her role. To receive such an invitation meant that her efforts had not gone unnoticed. A flicker of nervous excitement coursed through her. She had, of course, met the Trump family on numerous occasions, but this was different. This was personal. By the time Friday evening arrived, Karoline found herself standing outside the grand White House in trance, dressed in an elegant but understated navy blue dress. The historic building, bathed in soft golden light, felt more imposing than ever. A uniformed staff member led her inside, through the familiar hallways she had walked so many times before. Except tonight, she wasn't here as the press secretary. She was here as a guest. As she stepped into the dining room, she was met with the warm smiles of the Trump family. Donald Trump himself stood at the center, exuding his characteristic presence, flanked by Melania, Eric, Lara, and Barron. The setting was intimate yet grand. An elaborate chandelier cast a golden glow over the elegantly set table, adorned with fine china and gleaming silverware. Karoline, so glad you could join us. Trump greeted her with a firm handshake and an approving nod. You've been doing an incredible job. Really incredible. Melania, graceful as ever, offered a warm smile. Welcome, Karoline. It's wonderful to have you here. Eric and Lara chimed in with their greetings, while Barron, now taller than his father, gave a polite nod. The atmosphere was surprisingly relaxed. The tension Karoline had anticipated nowhere to be found. As they settled into their seats, a quiet realization dawned on her. This was not just a dinner. It was an opportunity, a rare glimpse into the personal side of the most powerful family in the country. And as the evening unfolded, Karoline would soon find herself experiencing emotions she had never expected. As Karoline settled into her seat at the grand dining table, she couldn't help but marvel at the warmth in the room. The table was set with an array of elegant dishes, perfectly roasted prime rib, creamy mashed potatoes, sautéed asparagus, and a decadent chocolate dessert waiting at the far end. The aroma filled the air, making the moment feel surprisingly comforting, almost like a family gathering rather than a high-profile political dinner. Donald Trump took his seat at the head of the table, glancing at Karoline with a knowing smile. So, Karoline, he began, slicing into his steak. How's it going out there? The press been treating you well, she chuckled, shaking her head. Well, sir, I wouldn't call it well, but I'd say I'm surviving. Lara Trump leaned in with a grin. Oh, come on. You're handling them better than anyone I've seen. I watch the briefings sometimes, and I just think, wow, she's got fire. Karoline felt a surge of appreciation. It wasn't often that people truly acknowledged how tough her job was. The constant scrutiny, the endless fact-checking, the hostile media, all of it could take a toll. But here, at this table, she felt understood. Melania, who had been quietly observing, spoke up with her signature grace. "It is not easy what you do. It takes strength." Karoline met her gaze, finding sincerity in her soft-spoken words. "Thank you, Mrs. Trump. That means a lot coming from you." Donald Trump laughed, setting his fork down. "You know, Karoline, I was just saying the other day, you remind me of me in those press conferences. Tough. You don't back down. That's why they keep coming at you so hard." She smiled, shaking her head. "Well, sir, I learned from the best." The table erupted into laughter, and for a moment, the weight of Washington politics felt distant. Here, among the Trumps, Karoline wasn't just the White House press secretary. She was part of something more. Barron, who had been mostly quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Do you ever get tired of it? The constant criticism." The room fell silent as the question hung in the air. Karoline glanced at the young man, impressed by his thoughtfulness. "Honestly," she said, taking a deep breath, "sometimes. But then I remember why I do it. I believe in this administration. I believe in defending the truth. And if that means taking a few hits along the way, so be it." Donald Trump pointed at her, nodding in approval. "See, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly the attitude we need." Eric raised his glass. To Karoline, keeping the media in check, one press conference at a time. A chorus of cheers followed as everyone lifted their glasses. Karoline, feeling an unexpected lump in her throat, took a sip of her wine, letting the moment sink in. She had expected an evening of polite conversation and political discussions. But what she hadn't expected was the overwhelming sense of family, of camaraderie, of belonging. And as the night continued, the emotions she had been holding in for months would soon come pouring out in ways she never anticipated. As the dinner progressed, the conversation flowed effortlessly between politics, family, and personal experiences. Karoline found herself surprised at how open and candid the Trumps were. There was a warmth here that the media rarely captured, a side of them that few people ever got to see. Lara Trump leaned forward, her eyes full of curiosity. "Karoline, I've always wondered, how did you get into this world? Politics, the media? It's not exactly an easy career path, especially for someone as young as you." Karoline set down her fork, pausing for a moment to gather her thoughts. "You know, I've always been drawn to politics. Ever since I was a kid, I loved watching debates, analyzing policies. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. I didn't come from a political family, but I knew that if I worked hard enough, I could carve a path." Donald Trump nodded approvingly. "That's the American spirit right there. You built your own success. Nobody handed it to you." She smiled, but there was a deeper truth behind her journey, one she rarely shared. As if reading her mind, Melania softly asked, "But it wasn't easy, was it?" Karoline exhaled, staring down at her plate for a moment before looking up. "No, it wasn't. I come from a small town in New Hampshire. My parents worked hard to give me opportunities they never had. My dad was a truck driver, my mom worked in a grocery store. I remember watching them struggle to make ends meet, yet they never complained. They taught me that hard work matters more than where you come from." The room fell silent as she continued. "When I first got into politics, people told me I wouldn't make it, that I was too young, too inexperienced. But I kept pushing forward. And then, when I got the chance to work for this administration, I knew I had to prove myself every single day." Lara reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "And you have. More than anyone I've seen." Melania's eyes softened. "Your parents must be very proud." At that moment, something inside Karoline cracked. Her voice wavered as she replied, "I wish they were here to see it." The air in the room shifted. Donald Trump leaned in slightly. "They're not." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "My dad passed away a few years ago. My mom's health isn't great. She watches my press briefings when she can, but she's back home, and I don't get to see her as often as I'd like." The table was silent. The weight of her words lingered in the air. Then Trump spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "You know, Karoline, I lost my brother years ago. It doesn't get easier, but you carry them with you. And you, he pointed at her with a firm nod. You're making your father proud every single day. Karoline let out a shaky breath, unable to stop the tear that escaped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. I'm sorry, Melania shook her head. No need to apologize. Family is everything. We understand. Baron, quiet until now, added, That's why you fight so hard, isn't it? Because of them. She nodded. Yeah, because of them. At that moment, she wasn't just the White House press secretary. She wasn't just a political figure. She was a daughter, a woman who had fought to be where she was, carrying the dreams of her parents on her shoulders. And in that room, surrounded by the first family, she felt something unexpected. She felt seen. The warmth of the moment lingered in the air, wrapping around Karoline like a comforting embrace. She hadn't expected to reveal so much about her past, but something about this dinner, about the genuine kindness in the room, had made her open up in a way she rarely did. Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table thoughtfully. You know, Karoline, there are a lot of people in DC who talk a big game, but very few actually have heart. And let me tell you, heart is what separates the winners from the losers. She smiled, feeling the sincerity behind his words. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Melania, ever the poised and graceful figure, reached for a small velvet box sitting on the sideboard behind her. She opened it and pulled out a delicate gold bracelet, simple yet elegant, with an engraving on the inside. Karoline's eyes widened as Melania held it out to her. This is for you, Melania said gently. Karoline hesitated. Mrs. Trump, I can't accept this. Melania shook her head with a small smile. You can, and you should. Inside, it says, with gratitude and strength, because that's what you have shown every day. Karoline's fingers trembled slightly as she took the bracelet, turning it over in her hands. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of recognition, of appreciation, of something deeply personal. She swallowed the lump in her throat as she carefully slipped it onto her wrist. Eric Trump, watching the exchange, grinned. Now that's something you won't see in the headlines tomorrow. The table chuckled, but Karoline was still overwhelmed by the moment. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. This is more than I ever expected. Donald Trump leaned forward, his expression serious yet full of pride. Karoline, you've stood by us through everything. And trust me, we don't forget loyalty. She met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. In a town where alliances shifted like the wind and loyalty was often fleeting, this moment felt different, felt real. Lara Trump raised her glass again. To Karoline, one of the toughest, most dedicated women we know. A chorus of cheers followed, and as Karoline lifted her glass, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, an overwhelming sense of belonging. The night was winding down, but the emotions she felt were only growing stronger. And before the evening ended, one final surprise would leave Karoline in tears. As the dinner wound down, Karoline found herself lost in the warmth of the evening. This wasn't the stiff, high-pressure political world she navigated every day. This was a family, one that, despite the public scrutiny, had a deep bond. And tonight, they had made her feel like she was part of it. Just as she thought the night couldn't be more meaningful, Melania softly spoke. Karoline, before you leave, there's something else. Donald Trump nodded in agreement. We have a little surprise for you. Karoline glanced around, curiosity mixing with the emotions she was already holding back. Baron, who had been relatively quiet throughout the evening, reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He walked over and handed it to her. This is from us. From all of us. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers slightly trembling as she unfolded the crisp sheet of paper. As her eyes scanned the words, the emotions hit her like a wave. It was a handwritten letter signed by every member of the Trump family. And it wasn't just a generic thank you note. It was personal. Karoline, you have been our voice when the world tried to silence us. You have stood strong in the storm, defended the truth, and faced challenges with grace and courage. We want you to know that your hard work, your sacrifices, and your loyalty do not go unnoticed. You are part of this family, and we are endlessly grateful for you. With appreciation and admiration, Donald, Melania, Eric, Lara, Baron. Karoline clutched the letter, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She tried to blink them away, but the sheer weight of the moment was too much. A single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. She had been through countless press briefings, faced the toughest reporters, and taken criticism from all sides without breaking. But this was different. This was personal. For months, she had fought battles, sometimes feeling like she was alone in the fire. But tonight, she realized she wasn't alone at all. Donald Trump, noticing her struggle to keep her emotions in check, gave a small nod. You're not just working for an administration, Karoline. You're fighting for something bigger. And we see that. Melania reached for her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. You have a home here always. That was it. That was the moment that broke her. Karoline let out a soft, shaky laugh as she wiped away her tears, overwhelmed by the depth of gratitude she felt. I don't know what to say, she whispered. This means more than I can ever express. Lara smiled. Then don't say anything. Just know it's true. Karoline took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had come to this dinner as the White House press secretary. She was leaving as something more. As she finally rose from her seat, the family stood with her. One by one, they embraced her, sealing the night with an unspoken promise. She would always have their trust, their support, and their gratitude. And as she stepped out into the cool Washington air, the golden glow of the White House behind her, Karoline Leavitt knew one thing for certain. This night had changed her forever.